Yo, what's good my people? Welcome back to the SillyMMA channel. And we have not got a card this weekend, and we might as well not have one next weekend with bloody Blanchfield and Barber. But I'm going to take this opportunity to review the 2025 we've had so far. I'm going to be rating every single UFC card we've had, from the Apex Fight Nights to the UFC 314s, all of them on today's video. Before we get in, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'm going to now explain the ranking system, how it works. So it's going to be 2 aspects out of 5 that will make up a total out of 10 rating. The quality of card. This is how good the card looks on paper. You know, is it stacked? Is there title fights? Is there headline fight, contender fights? Or is it a weak card with mostly non-ranked guys? And then the performance of card, because we have our cards that look good and do bad, and look bad and do good. So we're going to take both these aspects into consideration and give it an out of 10 total rating. An example of how the system will work. Take UFC 300 example, quality of card. It's a 4 out of 5 on the quality. I mean, there was big names on there. Everything was on there. Pereira, Olivera, all of that. Not a 5 out of 5 though. Probably because Bonaco was on the main card, but it was lacking a bit for what the UFC were having up to me. But the performance of card, 5 out of 5. Many finishes, many exciting fights. It was great. That gives a total rating of 9 out of 10. So it should get the aspect now. Let's get into the first fight night, Dern Vs Ribas 2. So the first card of the year, Amanda Ribas versus Mackenzie Dern, number 2. How was the quality of card on paper? I mean, the prelims had some decent prospects on it. Marcio Tulio, Magomed Gaziazulov, Nurilo Aliev, you know, Jacoby Smith. These are all decent guys on the prelims. There were some well-known guys, Thiago Moises, Jose Johnson. And then the main card, it was decent. Cesar Almeida versus Al Hassan, that was always a guaranteed KO. Ponzinibbio, a well-known name, female main event. And of course, Curtis versus Kopylov, which was the people's main event for this one. We also had C-Rod on it. For the quality of this card, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. You know, it's decent for an Apex card, but for an Apex card, that's all you need to know. Can't really give an Apex card more than a 3 out of 5. Max had some decent names on it, but not an exceptional card. Now onto the performance of the card. You know, it had a lot of finishes. This was a decent way to start the year. The first finish, Fatima Klein got a knockout. You know, Almabayev had a decent fight with Joe Selecki. Bruno Lopez beat Magomed Gaziazulov. I mean, there was also Jacoby Smith got a first round KO, same with Tulio and Burns. Got the first round submission. There were a few fun fights on this card as well. C-Rod and Austin Bashi, that was a decent fight. Soriano got a 30-second KO. You know, some decent finishes. Kopylov also managed to stop Curtis. Almeida stepped Al Hassan. Ponzinibbio come back to beat Harris, and Mackenzie Dern even got a finish. You know, this card was littered with finishes, and on that, the performance of card, I'm actually going to give it a 4 out of 5. This was an entertaining watch, you know. A lot of good finishes, a lot of interesting fights, a lot of interesting results and all of that. So the total rating for this card, a 2 out of 5 on the quality and a 4 out of 5 on the performance. I'm going to give this Apex card a 6 out of 10. And then on to the next event, which was our first pay-per-view of the year. Of course, UFC 311, Makhachev versus Renato Moicano. How was the card on paper? The early prelims were lackluster. We had Lambekov there, but you know, he's done nothing except be related to Khabib. The prelims were decent though. We had Peyton Talbot on there, who was going to get a big win over Barcelos. Emmet was on there. He wasn't really well known at the time. Bogdan Guskov, Grant Dawson, you know, these are decent guys. And the main card was exceptional. You know, Reina Derrida versus Kevin Holland, Jayton Almeida versus Spivak, Prohaska versus Hill, Marab versus Umar, and Islam versus Moicano, which was meant to be Sarukian. And this is good. And this was a stacked pay-per-view, man. I'm going to give the quality of this card a 4 out of 5 because, to be honest, the prelims and all that weren't that good, but the main card was so rich and so consistent, man. That has to be a 4 out of 5 in my opinion. And then for the performance of the card, the early prelims were a bit boring, man, all decisions. And now onto the prelims where it started to get good. Dawson beat Ferreira fair and square. Guskov and Elakena went in a back and forth war, and Bekuev got the fuck out of Zachary Reese, you know, beat him up, and Barcelos beat Talbot, the excitement factor. And then onto the main card. This was non-stop action. Reina Derrida submits Kevin Holland, Almeida sleeps Spivak, Prohaska has a masterclass against Hill, and Marab and Umar go back and forth in fight of the year so far, and Islam finishes Moicano in 1. This was an exciting card to watch, and I'm also going to give the performance for this card a 4 out of 5. And this brings the total for UFC 311 up to 8 out of 10. This was a very, very solid pay-per-view to kick us off for the paid events of the year. And then on to the next event, which we had UFC Fight Night, Adesanya vs Imavov, UFC Saudi Arabia. And for the quality of this card, I mean, this was a stacked fight night. The prelims were fun, you know, Bogdan Grad, Vicious, McKinney, Shamil the Blob Giziev, Naimov. You know, if you're into the sport, you know who these guys are. Even, I know it's WMMA, but Bueno Silva competed for a title in the fight before that, I'm pretty sure. It was Macy Chasson in the title, but you know what I mean. And the main card for Rez Ziam versus Mike Davies, that was a scrap. Olivera, a big bantamweight prospect. Sergey Pavlovich versus Jairzinho, a massive heavyweight matchup. MVP versus Magomedov, we were so excited for this. And Imavov versus Adesanya. This was an exceptional card. This was a stacked final, man. And for the quality of this card, I'm going to give this card a 4 out of 5. This was a good card, because you have to consider the context as well. It's not a pay-per-view, and that's the fights we're getting. Hell yeah, bro. 4 out of 5 on the quality and for the performance. You know, the prelims were they were good. They were decent. Giziev, McKinney, and Bodgangado all getting the TKOs. There was a few lackluster decisions though. You know, the likes of Naimov, Jamal Boogs, Hamdi Abdul Wahab, the greatest heavyweight of all time. And the main card, it was decent as well. Ziam and Davies had a bloody scrap. Oliveira and Magomedov went to it. Pavlovich had a boring fight. MVP and Magomedov also had a kind of boring fight. And Imavov knocked out Adesanya. And I'm going to give for performance of the card 3 out of 5. Because it wasn't the greatest, you know. It was more of the name value that kept us interested. But the plain fights were not the best. But they were interesting in themselves. I could give it a 4 out of 5. But it feels disrespectful considering I just gave UFC 311 a 4 out of 5, I think. So I'm going to give in total for this card a 7 out of 10. This was a great fight night to kick us off for the first crowded arena fight night of the year. And then on to the second pay-per-view of the year, UFC 312 down in Sydney, Australia. And on paper, this card was us. We had Australian prospects, you know, we had a few later in there, but most of these guys we don't know. We were most excited for a prelim fight just because of someone's last name in Alexander Daporia. And the main card, I mean, there was 2 ranked fights on this card, and one of them was between males. I mean, one of them was between females. You know, Duplessis for a Strickland headline. This was a weak card, man. Quality of card 2 out of 5. This was a rubbish pay-per-view, man. That Saudi Arabia fight night mogged it so hard. Onto the performance. I mean, this actually wasn't a rubbish pay-per-view. It got a bit long, but early on, Kulkan Salkid got a beautiful TKO over Anshin W. Welterweight Anklaev, bro, them body kicks he was firing up against Giuseppe, like, were beautiful, man. Thanks, Joe Rogan, man. People forget, man, for reminding me about 50 times. But the prelims weren't the greatest. We had a few good finishes, few good movements at times. And then the main card, it was decent, but overall, man, the whole card was just a bit lackluster. And for the performance of the card, to be honest, I'm also going to give it a 2 out of 5. It was a bit harsh, but kind of have to, bro. So on total, this is a 4 out of 10 card in my opinion. There was just nothing major, no big implications. A main event with not much meaning or spy behind it. And yeah, 4 out of 10 card. And then on to the second Apex event of the year, main event by Cannonier and Rodrigues. Yo, my accent's sick. Anyway, quality of card. The prelims, there were some decent names, man. Walter Walker, Vince Morales, Bonfim Estevam. Like, if you know the sport, you know who these guys are on the main card. Rodolfo Vieira, you know, Shahbajan, Qatar, Zalal, Cannonier, Rodrigues. There were some decent names for Apex card. But it was mid. Quality of card, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. It's nothing major. Had a good main event, but come on, man. You can't give any Apex card above a 2 out of 5 because they're always ass. Onto the performance of the card. This wasn't that bad of a card. There was lackluster decisions at times. There were some boring decisions. But overall, you know, Walter Walker got a finish. You know, Joe Delgado got the first round TKO. Cannonier and Rodrigues went back and forth in the war, which ended up finishing in the 4th round. But then most of the fights were lackluster. You know, there were some more KOs, but Zalal got a boring decision. That was a boring fight. I know there were a few of them on this card, so I'm also going to give performance for this card. I'm actually going to give it a 3 out of 5. I was going to give it 2 out of 5, but it wasn't that bad to watch. I remember, like, I was getting interested at times. But yeah, for this fight night, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 for Gregory Rodrigues versus Jared Cannonier. And then on to UFC Seattle, one of my favourite events this year. The quality of card. I mean, the prelims, man, this was a beautiful fight night. Bakauskas, Rozaboyev, Ricky Simon, Abdul Malik, Biz Prospect, Costa Kutalaba. You know, everyone knows these guys. That's just a prelim. Main card, Alonso Menafield, John Seaver, man. People forget, man. He fought Mazda Baldasharian before Bryce Mitchell, you know. We had Rob Font, Anthony Hernandez, Cejudo in the main event. Brendan Allen. This was a beautiful card, man. For the quality of card for a fight night, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. This was an exciting card. I couldn't wait for this card. And then the performance of the card. All the prelims were finishes. You know, we had 5 TKOs. Okay, we have 2 submissions, and onto the main card, it reduced in finishes a bit, but they were there, man. Like, for Jean Silva, at least they were there. And even the decisions, they weren't that bad. Rob Font and Matsumoto got in a back and wall scrap. Menfield and Walker got in a sloppy, marauding scrap. Udonga and Cejudo was a fun, quick, technical fight while it lasted, you know. And for the performance of this card, fuck it, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5, which brings the total for a 9 out of 10 UFC Seattle. This was an exceptional card, man. Big names, big finishes, big performances. That was that. On to the next Apex card, the third of the year, UFC Fight Night, Kape vs Almabayev. For the quality of this card, I mean, Temerov was on it, you know, Chepe Mariscal. Yeah, nah, there was nothing, man. To be honest, I'm giving this a 1 out of 5 on the quality of the card, but the performance is a different story. The prelims, it was mostly decisions. You know, we had one TKO at the end with Mario Pinto, but then you go on to the main card, and this was great, man. Patterson upsets and sleeps Barlow. Emil and Gomez, like a big underdog. Emil wins. Haqparast and Ribovic go back in a great scrap. Brundage and Marquez go to war before someone gets slept. And Kamal, who the hell is Kamal? Manel Cap just destroys Almabayev completely, shuts him down. So for the performance of this card, you know, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I mean, I actually enjoyed this one, and even the decisions, they had something behind them, man. This was actually a fun card, which brings the total for a 5 out of 10 on this Fight Night, UFC Kape vs Almabayev. On to the next card, UFC 313, the third pay-per-view. Quality of the card, I mean, there was one early prelim between Ozzy Diaz and Santos, so, you know, not much there. But I remember that fight, that was actually pretty decent scrap, you know, they were throwing. We had Marion Santos, you just won the Ultimate Fighter. Carlos Leo, you just got robbed to Fit Factor. Dinov in the fight before. Joshua Van, Bruno Ferreira, Petrosian, Gaethje, Bahamondes, Mauricio Hofi, Magomed Anklaev, Pereira, Fiziev. These were all good names. But, you know, this was quite a top-heavy card. But it had some decent throughout the prelims if you're not a casual as such. For the quality of this card, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Because it was a big Pereira pay-per-view, but it wasn't that stacked. And then for the quality of this card, this wasn't the greatest card, you know. We had a few fun fights, few like submissions, all of that. TKOs, Leo, Ferreira, Joshua Van got a nice decision. Santos, Rob Marshall. You know, there was something to talk about. And on to the main card, Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev went back in a bit of a chess match, but, you know, wasn't the most entertaining. Gaethje and Fiziev had a fun scrap. You know, they're always going to have that. But Hamanda's got a big finish against Turner. Lemos vs Lucindo. Oh, just ban woman MMA. And Rolfi styled on green. I'm going to give the performance for this card. I know I said it wasn't great, but I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. It was actually pretty fun, man. From my point of view, at least. I know there'll be some guys, some bums in the comments saying they don't agree with me. That's my opinion, and I'm entitled to that. So I'm actually going to give this one, so it's a 3, it's a 4, which according to my calculations makes 7. So the UFC 313 is a 7 out of 10. And back into the Apex we go. Vettori vs Dolidze number 2, another rematch. Is your Apex main event, and the quality of this card, I mean, this shit was ass. I ain't trying to sugarcoat it. This was a 1 out of 10 quality card, man. This card on paper was rubbish. And into the performance of the card, it wasn't that bad, you know. We had 2 finishes by females in the first 2 fights of the night. That's crazy. They were both knockouts as well. We had a few finishes, a few submissions. Cortes Acosta checked out Ryan Spann. It wasn't that bad. There were some decent finishes within the card, you know. A few early knockouts. Olivera got a beautiful Kimura. I'll give performance of the card. Actually, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed watching this one, you know. Usually it's a pain staying for the Apex, but this one, it wasn't that bad. So overall, that's a 1, because that was a shit card on paper. And 4 out of 5, that's a 5 out of 10 card in my opinion. I could have given it maybe a 4. Either a 4 or a 5, but, you know, I'm going to say 5. 5 out of 10 for Raymond Dolidze versus Vettori. And then on to the next event, UFC Fight Night 254, UFC London. Sean Brady vs Leon Edwards. The quality of this card, I mean, this was just your average London card. There were some decent names on it, you know, just the UK guys. And it was mid, man. It was a top heavy fight night. I'll give it, to be honest, man, I'll give it a 3 just because it was in the UK. I'll give it a 3 just because it was the UK names and it was relevant. But to be honest, there was only 3 like well-known fights, matchups on this card. For the performance of the card, this was a rubbish fight night, I'll be honest. This was a pain to watch, man. That was the occasional finish. The prelims were littered with decisions. The main event was nice to watch. I mean, it wasn't the most tempting, but I find it nice because I hate Leon Edwards, even though I'm from the UK. Guys pissed me off. Allberg vs Blachowicz was a tough watch. Holland vs Nelson was a fun one. But for the performance, I'll give it a 2. So that's a 3 plus 2. That's a 5 out of 10 card, and that's generous as well. But I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I have to stick to my rulings. That's UFC London, you know. Then UFC on ESPN, UFC Mexico, Moreno vs Usyk. Quality of the card, it had the Mexican guys on it, nothing special. Had a few good matchups at Debagautier making his debut, Costa vs Cerrone, you know. And on the main card, Moreno, Usyk, Torres, Duba. It was decent for a fight night, but you can't give it more than, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Similar to the London one, it's got the Mexican relevant guys, so it's good in that context. And then onto the main, onto the performance. Oh man, about the performance of the card. It's a pretty fun card, you know. There's a few back and forth decisions, but mostly it's like some good finishes, man. Good KOs. Rosas Jr. It's always a spectacle, you know. So I'm gonna give the performance a 3 out of 5. So that's a 6 out of 10. This card, UFC Mexico. It was actually a pretty fun, pretty decent card. Then UFC on ESPN, Emmet vs Murphy. Back in the Apex. You know, I hate the Apex, man. I actually just get rid of it. We had Martin Berdai versus Iran. You had Victor Henry, Luka Lukbonmi, Barboza. We had some decent guys on this card, you know. Even Lee Chanko. What you know about Lee Chanko? I'm joking. No one knows. We had Torres Finney. But quality of this card, this was a 2 out of 5. And I give it a 2. Could have been a 1, but I give it just because GM3 was on it, to be honest. Apex Warrior. And for the performance, yeah, 1 out of 5. This was a shit card. This was a painful card to watch, to put it completely transparent. So this is a 3 out of 10 card, the lowest card yet. Emmet vs Murphy, man, this one was not fun. This was a bit of a drag. Then we had UFC 314, the best card of the year. I mean, on paper, this card was stacked. I mean, the early prelims had fun names, like Mikel Olizejek. Prelims had Iges, you know, a female title eliminator. And then the main card, Chandler, Paddy, Rodrigues, Pitbull, Sean Silva, Mitchell. I mean, to be honest, for the standard that we've had this year, this is a 5 out of 5 quality card. Like, when you look at on paper, and then the performance, you know what I'm saying, 5 out of 5. I mean, finishes everywhere. Paddy Pimblett dominating, Volkanovski and Lopez going to war, and Volk regaining the belt. Rodrigues styling on Pitbull, Sean Silva dominating Mitchell, Reyes getting back in there, getting a big win over Nikita Krylov. I mean, this main card is beautiful, and the prelims were fun. Dan Ige, you know, Chase Super and Jim Miller, they were some high level grappling exchanges. And even the early prelims, man, Mikel Shimadaj, Marco Tulio and Gore went to war. Man, this was such a great card, man. The first 10 out of 10, I'm the only 10 out of 10 from what I'm thinking of right now. Then onto UFC Kansas City. This was a decent card. I'll be honest, I did not watch the prelims for this card, but I mean, there was 4 TKOs, 4 finishes early on. Wellmaker got a beautiful KO, I did see that one. But then I slept, but I did wake up for the main card. But the main card, it had good names on it. The quality of this card for a fight, now I'm actually going to give it a 4 out of 5. Because Ikram had a scare of Randy Brown. I'd be like, this for a fight night card is stacked. I mean, we're all thinking this going into it. Jamling Yang, Ian Machado, Gary, Gallus, Bratches, big names. And for the performance of the card, I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. It was pretty fun, you know. There was a few sleeper fights though, like Onama and Abis Magomedov vs Pereira. Don't get me started on that. And there was a lot of them in the prelims, but I'll give it a 3 out of 5 because when the fights were good, they were good. And the main event was beautiful, technical, powerful stuff as well. So that's UFC Kansas City, which in total is getting a 4 plus a 3. That's a 7 out of 10 for that. Then on to UFC Iowa, Des Moines. I mean, on paper, this wasn't the worst card. You know, there was some decent prelims, I say that, but I'm looking and there's literally nothing. But this was a weak card, to be honest. It was quite top heavy, the main and the co-main event. You know, D-Rod vs Ponzinibbio was always going to be fun, but nah, I give this 2 out of 5, to be honest. This was a weak card. And the performance, it wasn't bad, but to be honest, 2 out of 5 as well. This was a pretty lame card in my opinion. There were some few good finishes like Almabayev, you know, and that Sandhagen, but overall I just think it was a mid card. But watching Bo Nickel melt could take this card to a 10 out of 10 alone, man. I hate that guy, Bo Nickel. And then on to the most recent pay-per-view, UFC 315, Bilal Muhammad vs JDM. On paper, this wasn't the greatest pay-per-view, man. This was a pretty weak pay-per-view, you know. There was pretty much irrelevant guys on the prelims. You know, there were some interesting fights, but nothing major, nothing to write home about. And the main card was decent, but it was littered with WMMA fights. For the performance of this card, this was a great card, you know. All the early prelims, except for one, were first round knockouts. You know, there's a lot of finishes throughout the card and a lot of entertaining fights. JD and Bilal Muhammad went to war in the main event. You don't want to speak about Shevchenko and Fiorot. And Grasso vs Silva Clay was shit, but Zahabi and Aldo, man, what a fight. Zahabi just going forward, Aldo just trying his best, man. It was a beautiful fight, and St. Denis dominated Prepolek. You know, I'll give this a 4 out of 5. So for the quality of this card, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5, okay? It looked pretty ass. And then for the actual performance of the card, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. So this was a 6 out of 10 pay-per-view overall in my opinion. And then for the most recent event, before we move on to Blanchfield vs Bloody Barber, Burns vs Morales, on paper, this wasn't the worst Apex card, you know. I mean, prelims were pretty weak. We had Jared Gordon and Moises little vet face off there, but the main card was pretty good, you know. Notable names: Costa, Arosa. I mean, we had Craig and Beato. They got cancelled. Ruzaboyev and Stosas, man. These are warriors, bro. Santos vs Yusef and Burns vs Morales. These are notable guys, you know. For the quality of the card, I'll give it a 3 out. It's a 2 out of 5. I had to stick to my raw Apex cards on mid. It's 2 out of 5. And then for the performance of the card, this was actually a pretty decent card, you know. There was a lot of finishes. I mean, all the prelims were finishes, except from the bloody Getty, Pennington, of course. And the main card, there wasn't as many finishes. There was one new main event, and that was it. But there were some few wars, so I'm going to give the performance of this card, I'm actually going to give it 4 out of 5. This was a fun watch, which makes this a 6 out of 10 card. And that also is the final card of this video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Leave a comment what's your favourite card been so far this year. I bet it's UFC 314. But anyway, thanks for watching. Shout out SillyMMA.